And by the way, this may be the last time you ever see me.
Religious. Are you religious? Do you believe in something? Anything?
Yeah, I believe in me.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you don't believe in anything else? In God, or as in, like, is there something like that?
Well, you can separate God from religion, which is what I do.
When somebody as rock solid as Morgan Freeman suddenly appears visibly shaken, you know something seriously heavy is going down fast. This is a dude whose voice has delivered authority, wisdom, and calmness for literal decades. So, witnessing him looking tense and genuinely unsettled wasn't some performance. It was pure raw reality hitting everyone hard. What came out during his unexpected public appearance wasn't rehearsed emotion at all. It was a man watching an absolute nightmare finally burst into broad daylight. For the past couple days, the entire story surrounding Rob Reiner's passing had been carefully wrapped in gentle language and softened edges. Public statements kept leaning on words specifically meant to ease the shock, words deliberately designed to lower the temperature.
We're standing outside Los Angeles Superior Courtroom where there have been a significant development in the Nick Reiner case. Reiner, 32, appeared in court for the second time for the double murder of his parents, Hollywood director Nick Reiner and his wife Michelle Singer Reiner. Reiner appeared in court in a brown prison outfit. He was very hunched over, his hair newly shorn, and he would occasionally look out over the courtroom. Occasionally would give a grim smile, but for the most part, very much kept staring ahead throughout the proceedings.
But Morgan Freeman didn't follow that safe script whatsoever. He stepped up and tore straight through the careful packaging, forcing absolutely everyone to look at what had been festering underneath the surface this whole time. He didn't step forward to offer generic comfort or recycled sympathy to anyone. He spoke up because in his direct view, the silence surrounding Nick Reiner wasn't accidental at all. It was completely deliberate. Freeman made it crystal clear that ignoring obvious warning signs for years isn't neutrality, it's active participation, and that's precisely what made his words hit so devastatingly hard. This wasn't just some casual industry connection either. Morgan Freeman and Rob Reiner formed a genuine bond during the filming of The Bucket List. That project wasn't simply about endings, it was about reflection, not legacy and the crushing weight of unfinished business. Freeman explained that during late-night conversations on set, Rob spoke openly about his children. But whenever Nick's name came up, the energy shifted instantly, and the air went ice cold. People sometimes forget that Freeman's entire career is built on watching people closely and carefully. He studies behavior, silence, tension, and what's deliberately left unsaid. What he revealed about the Reiner household completely reframed everything we thought we understood about this family. At one point during his statement, he stopped himself mid-sentence, stepped back from the microphone, and looked physically shaken before saying, "We all saw the cracks forming, and we all handed Rob the glue to fix them, knowing it wouldn't hold." That line alone sent shockwaves through the entire room. While headlines keep circling the investigation details and the scene outside the Brentwood property, Freeman focused on something way deeper. He talked about patterns, pressure, and years of enabling that slowly built toward this tragic ending. He wasn't discussing a sudden collapse out of nowhere. He was describing a long, deliberately ignored descent. Then he brought up a specific moment from 3 years ago that had never gone public before. A private dinner, closed doors, industry insiders only. Nick arrived without warning, and Freeman said the entire room froze instantly. He described the tension as immediate and suffocating, like danger had quietly taken a seat at the table. Rob Reiner, usually the loudest presence in any room, suddenly folded into himself completely. Freeman said he physically shrank in posture.
He had some struggles from the time he was 15 to 19 with substance abuse, and he was in and out of a number of rehab facilities, and, it was a very tough time.
His voice lowered dramatically. His entire body language changed. That was the exact moment it clicked for him. A man considered untouchable in Hollywood was deeply afraid inside his own family dynamic, and that realization changed absolutely everything. This is where Morgan Freeman's words stop feeling like commentary and start feeling like a warning that came way too late. What he shared next wasn't meant for the public at all. According to Freeman, Rob Reiner reached out to him just weeks before everything unraveled. And this wasn't some casual check-in between old friends catching up. It was a late-night call filled with fear, confusion, and desperate questions. Rob didn't know how to ask directly about what he was feeling. Freeman explained that Rob kept circling the exact same topic, asking hypothetical questions that weren't hypothetical whatsoever. Questions about boundaries, about when love turns into danger, about whether it's ever right to shut the door on your own child. That kind of question doesn't come from a place of comfort. It comes from pure desperation. Think about how absolutely heavy that is for a second. Rob Reiner, a man with endless influence and access to every kind of help imaginable, quietly asking if it was okay to protect himself from his own son. Freeman admitted he told Rob to focus on keeping Michelle safe and to finally put distance between himself and the chaos. But even as he said it, he could tell Rob wasn't built that way at all. The same compassion that made Rob such a powerful storyteller was the very thing working against him now. The empathy behind Stand By Me wasn't just talent. It was who he was at his core, and Freeman made it clear that Nick understood that deeply. He knew which emotional buttons to press and exactly when to press them. This is why Freeman completely rejects the idea that this was some sudden break or random spiral. He pushed back hard against the neat narrative being floated around because it's easier to swallow. According to Freeman, this wasn't confusion. It was calculation. He used that word deliberately, knowing exactly how serious it sounded. Nick knew the house layout like muscle memory. He knew routines, access points, and timing perfectly. He knew that if he played vulnerable, his mother would respond with comfort. And he knew that if pressure was applied, Rob would respond by trying to fix things with resources instead of walls. Freeman didn't say this lightly. But he made it clear that kindness became a weapon used against them, as painful as it sounds. Freeman suggested that Rob and Michelle weren't careless people. They were decent people caught in an impossible position. They believed love could still diffuse what was clearly unstable. They kept hoping compassion would calm something that was already primed to explode. Then Freeman shifted to the night. Everything ended. And this is where his account sharply diverged from the official summaries. Reports described the scene in cold, technical language, stripped of all humanity. Freeman, speaking from what he described as direct knowledge from people close to the situation, painted a much more disturbing picture. He pointed out something that immediately stood out to him. There were no clear signs that Rob tried to protect himself physically.
I sat in that chair, and I know exactly.
That detail alone changes absolutely everything. No struggle doesn't mean acceptance. It means trust. It means Rob didn't believe, even in those final seconds, that his son would actually cross that line. Freeman's voice faltered when he explained what that really means. Rob wasn't facing a stranger. He wasn't bracing for harm. He was standing in front of his child, still trying to calm him, still trying to connect, still trying to pull him back from the edge. Freeman said quietly that Rob didn't end his life fighting someone unknown. He ended it reaching for someone he loved. That image cuts through all the noise, all the headlines, all the speculation. It leaves behind nothing but the unbearable reality of a father who refused to believe the worst until it was unavoidable. And that's exactly why Freeman spoke out when everyone else stayed silent. In moments like this, Hollywood usually closes ranks tight. Stories get softened, details get blurred, and uncomfortable truths get buried under respectful distance. But Freeman made it crystal clear that silence wasn't protecting anyone anymore. It was only hiding lessons that should have been faced long ago. At this point, it's clear that preserving a polished legacy isn't Morgan Freeman's priority anymore. In his view, the only way to truly respect Rob Reiner is to stop protecting the lies surrounding Nick Reiner. And beneath Freeman's calm delivery, there was unmistakable anger simmering just below the surface. He didn't just speak about Nick, he called out the entire system that kept cushioning him. Freeman openly criticized the friends who kept slipping Nick money after Rob finally drew a line. The industry connections who kept reopening doors that should have stayed closed permanently. The people who offered endless second chances, not because Nick earned them, but because of the last name he carried. At one point, Freeman didn't soften his words at all. He said, "We created something dangerous by feeding it, and then we left Rob and Michelle alone to deal with the consequences." That wasn't just frustration. That was an accusation aimed squarely at an entire social circle. And in a place like Beverly Hills, that circle is absolutely massive. This lines up with what's been quietly circulating for years behind studio gates. Nick Reiner wasn't some misunderstood teenager. He was a grown man who had access to every possible advantage.
Is it hard to reveal that stuff for you?
It's not hard to reveal that stuff. It's only hard to reveal that stuff to then get told, you're a spoiled, white, rich kid. And it's like, okay, maybe all these things, but...
Top-tier recovery programs, elite therapy, financial safety nets, and even career opportunities handed to him without effort. Most people will never see even one of those resources in a lifetime. Freeman made a point to call out the double standard that's already forming. He knows exactly how the defense strategy will unfold. Claims about impaired judgment, reduced responsibility, or emotional instability are almost guaranteed. But Freeman wasn't waiting for the courtroom to respond. He shut that narrative down before it could gain traction. According to Freeman, there was nothing unclear about Nick's state of mind. He said he interacted with him personally. He described Nick as fully aware, calculated, and emotionally manipulative, coming from someone with Freeman's credibility. Those words carry serious weight. This isn't gossip floating around. It's a first-hand assessment from a man the public trusts completely, whether intentional or not. Freeman has now positioned himself as a powerful voice before any trial even begins. His statements alone are already shaping how people see this situation, and the ripple effect is obvious. Other actors close to Rob, people like Billy Crystal and Tom Cruise, have gone completely quiet. That silence feels heavy, not because they disagree, but because Freeman went further than anyone expected. Someone finally cut through the rumors that were spiraling out of control. The whispers were getting ugly, with people questioning Rob's role, hinting at provocation, or suggesting something dark had been hidden inside the home. Freeman addressed that head-on with zero hesitation. He described the Reiner household as warm, stable, and deeply loving. He spoke about Michelle Singer Reiner with genuine reverence. He portrayed her as someone who spent years trying to hold the family together, always choosing patience, always choosing hope. In Freeman's telling, there was no darkness inside that home until it was brought in. He framed the situation as a peaceful space disrupted by a destructive presence. He was very intentional about how history should remember this, not as a family failure, but as an intrusion that overwhelmed even the strongest foundation. Then came one detail that instantly grabbed attention. Freeman mentioned a script. Apparently, Rob had been quietly working on a new project, something deeply personal. Freeman didn't reveal specifics, but he hinted that Nick may have discovered it before everything collapsed. That possibility adds a chilling layer to the story. If Rob was writing from his own life, exploring family struggles or personal demons, and Nick recognized himself in those pages, not as a hero, but as a warning. That realization could have struck deep, especially for someone driven by ego and control. Was the script a mirror Nick didn't want to face? Was it art forcing him to confront how others truly saw him? Freeman didn't say it outright, but the implication lingered heavily in the air. Sometimes truth on paper cuts deeper than any confrontation, and that's where Freeman leaves the public, staring at the uncomfortable intersection of art, family, and accountability. He wasn't trying to shock for attention.
Where did you learn to speak so beautifully? Is this something that you worked on or just from your family? Were they...
I don't even know what you mean. I went to school to study how to be an actor.
Uh-huh.
And in that school, Los Angeles City College, I had a voice and diction instructor who was very good at his job. And so you had to learn to speak and sound your final consonants.
So you
Things
actually
like that.
learned something in college.
He was trying to freeze the narrative before it could be twisted beyond recognition, because in his eyes, the truth is already painful enough without being rewritten. Morgan Freeman didn't spell everything out, but he left just enough to shake people to their core. He described Rob as someone who was finally putting his own reality onto the page, and Freeman made it clear that honesty can be dangerous when it exists inside a space built on denial. Real truth doesn't sit quietly where lies have been allowed to grow. Freeman urged everyone to pay attention to timing. He revealed that he spoke with Michelle just 2 days before everything collapsed. She didn't sound alarmed or panicked. She sounded worn down, not afraid, just drained in a way that only comes from years of constant tension and careful navigation, according to Freeman. Michelle mentioned that Nick was planning to come by for the holidays. One more attempt to reset things. One more effort to pull the family back into alignment. Freeman said he immediately felt uneasy. He advised her to meet somewhere public, somewhere neutral. He warned her not to bring that energy back into the home. That home mattered to him. He referred to it as a place of peace, something sacred that shouldn't be disturbed. And now imagine carrying the weight of that conversation afterward. Imagine being the person who gave the warning that wasn't followed. Not because it was ignored, but because love kept hoping. That's the reason Freeman appeared so fractured during his statement. What we're seeing isn't anger anymore. It's guilt. Survivor's guilt. He's questioning every decision, wondering if he should have shown up himself, wondering if he should have made a call, exaggerated a concern, forced intervention before it was too late. Reality has a brutal way of settling in once everything stops moving. Rob Reiner wasn't just a filmmaker. He was a source of comfort for generations. His work created warmth, laughter, and connection. When Harry Met Sally and The Princess Bride weren't just movies. They were emotional landmarks. To know that someone who built joy for millions met such a cold and isolating end creates a kind of mental clash that's hard to process. Freeman is trying to close that gap for people. He's explaining that the man audiences loved was real, but the private world Rob lived in was far heavier than whatever reached the screen. Freeman made it clear that celebrity doesn't create immunity. Fame doesn't block harm. Wealth doesn't heal instability. He stripped away the illusion that powerful people live in a different reality. At the core, pain doesn't care about status. Loss doesn't negotiate.
I want to thank everybody and anybody who ever had anything at all to do with the making of this picture. But I especially want to thank...
Then Freeman shifted his focus back to Nick, and this is where he refused to hold back. He described someone who believed entitlement was inherited, someone who moved through life expecting doors to open simply because of his last name. We see entitlement in privileged circles all the time, but Freeman stressed that this situation went far beyond arrogance. He called it corrosive. He recalled an incident on a set where Nick lashed out at a production assistant over something trivial. The moment escalated fast, and Rob stepped in, not to defend his son, but to apologize on his behalf. Think about that image. Rob Reiner, a respected legend, apologizing to a young assistant because his adult son couldn't regulate himself. Freeman said Rob looked diminished that day, embarrassed, exhausted, and that moment stuck with him. That wasn't the beginning, and it wasn't the end. Freeman said the pattern intensified over time. Disrespect turned into financial pressure. Financial pressure turned into emotional strain, and emotional strain eventually crossed into something far more destructive. Freeman wants people to understand that this story didn't explode overnight. It unfolded gradually, predictably, and tragically. Each ignored moment stacked on top of the last. Each compromise pushed the line further back. That's why this isn't just another headline or breaking update in Freeman's eyes. This is a memorial for a family dynamic that was slowly eroded from the inside. A warning about what happens when love keeps stepping forward while boundaries keep stepping back. And the most painful truth of all, everyone involved thought there was still time. At the core of everything Morgan Freeman shared, there's one thing he's openly grieving, not just the loss of a friend, but the collapse of hope itself. Freeman said Rob Reiner's greatest weakness was the same thing that defined him as a father. He never stopped believing that the son he raised would one day return. Rob kept holding on to the idea that the person standing in front of him was temporary, that the anger, the entitlement, the volatility were phases that could still pass. Freeman framed it as a quiet warning to every parent listening. At what point does hope stop being love and start becoming danger? According to Freeman, that line had been crossed long before anyone wanted to admit it. But Rob and Michelle couldn't see it clearly because parental love distorts reality. When you're a parent, you don't see a threat. You see potential. You see memory. You see who your child used to be. Freeman's decision to speak out doesn't just carry emotional weight. It carries legal consequences too. His direct description of Nick Reiner as aware, intentional, and manipulative directly challenges any attempt to reshape the story later. If Nick's legal team tries to frame him as misunderstood or damaged by his upbringing, they now face a massive obstacle. Because Morgan Freeman isn't speculating. He didn't say maybe or it seemed like. He said he was there. He said Nick was loved. He said support never stopped. And most importantly, he made it clear that responsibility wasn't absent. That puts any defense strategy in an impossible position. How do you challenge a witness like Freeman without alienating everyone watching? His presence alone shifts perception. He didn't accuse quietly. He stated it plainly, and juries don't ignore voices they've trusted for decades. What's equally striking is what Freeman didn't ask for. He didn't request privacy. He didn't suggest silence. He didn't urge people to move on. Instead, he asked the public to look harder, to stop glancing at headlines and start examining patterns. Freeman wants the world to understand exactly who Nick Reiner is, not as a caricature, not as a rumor, but as a person shaped by choices. He understands how systems work. He understands how influence bends outcomes. And he made it clear he won't allow this story to quietly dissolve into softened consequences. He openly acknowledged a hard truth. Wealthy families with powerful connections often see different outcomes. Controlled environments instead of real consequences. Temporary isolation instead of long-term accountability. Freeman is using his voice deliberately, not out of revenge, but out of resolve. Some might call it harsh, others might call it necessary. Freeman lost more than a colleague. He lost a friend, someone he shared long days with on set, someone he joked with about aging, about life slowing down, about growing older together. Those memories are now permanently altered. There's also an undercurrent of betrayal running through everything Freeman said. Not just personal betrayal, but institutional betrayal. He hinted that people in the industry knew Nick was unstable and chose silence instead. There were incidents, arguments at private events, aggressive behavior brushed aside to avoid embarrassment. Freeman suggested that reputation protection became more important than intervention. That concern for Rob's image outweighed concern for safety, and in doing so, the system may have sealed the very outcome it hoped to avoid. He referenced a moment from years earlier where action could have changed everything. If accountability had happened then, if consequences had been real, this story might look very different today. Instead, patterns were ignored, and behavior was managed instead of confronted. It's a painful example of how shielding someone for the sake of appearances can backfire catastrophically. Good intentions don't cancel real-world outcomes. Sometimes they accelerate them. Freeman also raised a chilling question without asking it directly. Is Nick aware of how completely the narrative has shifted? Does he understand that one of the most trusted voices on the planet has reframed the story permanently? Freeman's words carry more weight than endless speculation ever could. When he says there's no forgiveness left in this story, it doesn't sound emotional. It sounds final. And when he speaks about Michelle, his tone softens completely. He describes her as the foundation, the bridge, the one who held everything together for as long as possible. Her absence is felt in every sentence, and Freeman makes sure the world remembers exactly who she was, not as a footnote, but as the heart of a family that tried until there was nothing left to give. Michelle was the one holding everything together. She was the center point, the balance, the reason the household kept functioning at all. And the fact that she was also taken in this collapse is what makes the situation impossible to rationalize in Morgan Freeman's eyes. Freeman made it clear that crossing that line erased any remaining room for sympathy. He suggested that anger, impulse, or emotional chaos might explain one act, but not both. To turn on the person who spent years trying to protect, heal, and stabilize you requires something colder, something detached. Freeman said he's only encountered that level of emotional emptiness when studying the darkest characters of his career. That's the point where his tone hardened completely. This wasn't grief speaking anymore. It was clarity. Freeman wasn't speculating, and he wasn't searching for explanations. He was drawing a line between dysfunction and something far more deliberate. The interview closed with a moment that left the room silent. The reporter asked a simple question. How should Rob Reiner be remembered? Most people expected a reflection on his career, his impact, his films. Freeman didn't go there. He paused, looked straight ahead, eyes heavy but focused, and said he wanted Rob remembered as a man who loved without limits. Then he added that he wanted Nick remembered as someone who never learned how to love at all. The contrast landed like a final verdict. That statement wasn't crafted for headlines. It was raw. It stripped away fame, status, and distraction. It reframed the entire story as something deeply human and deeply broken. This isn't a celebrity story anymore. It's about the collapse of connection inside a family. It's about what happens when love keeps extending itself into a space where it's no longer returned. We're now entering a different phase of this tragedy. The disbelief is fading, the numbness is lifting, and what's taking its place is directed anger. Freeman didn't create that emotion. He gave it focus. That focus is aimed squarely at Nick Reiner and the system that allowed his behavior to continue unchecked for years. The silence, the excuses, the protection disguised as compassion. Freeman all but confirmed that what's coming next won't be quiet. A trial like this won't stay contained. It's going to tear through private circles and public reputations alike. Stories long buried in quiet neighborhoods and behind closed gates are going to surface. By speaking first, Freeman sent a clear message. He signaled that the wall of silence is cracking, that people who've been sitting on information no longer have to stay quiet. Once one voice breaks through, others follow, and they will. Accounts will surface, incidents will be revisited, moments once dismissed as rumors will be re-examined with new context. The carefully maintained image of the Reiner family will be dismantled piece by piece. What remains won't be flattering, won't be simple. It will be the truth of two people who believed love could still fix what was already unraveling. This isn't gossip or spectacle. It's a modern tragedy unfolding in real time, the kind of story that feels scripted because the patterns are so painfully familiar. Freeman even alluded to that irony. Rob Reiner was a storyteller. He understood structure. He understood warning signs. He knew that unresolved tension doesn't disappear. It escalates. Freeman hinted that Rob may have sensed where things were heading. That's the most haunting part of all. The idea that someone who understood narratives so deeply might have recognized the ending but still hoped it could be changed. Freeman's heartbreak comes from knowing he couldn't alter that outcome. He couldn't rewrite the final act. All he can do now is describe what's left behind. And what's left is heavy, uncomfortable, necessary. The story hurts to hear, but Freeman made it clear that looking away only ensures it happens again somewhere else. Silence didn't protect anyone here, and truth, no matter how painful, is the only thing that remains. This is why turning away isn't an option anymore. If something like this can unfold inside a guarded neighborhood in Los Angeles, surrounded by wealth, comfort, and opportunity, then it forces a hard truth into the open. No amount of money or status can fully protect a family when something inside is already breaking. When Morgan Freeman finally stepped away from the cameras, he did it alone. No crowd, no handlers, just a man carrying a truth heavier than anything he's ever said on screen. He looked older, not because of age, but because loss changes people in ways time never could. Losing a close friend reshapes you, but losing one to an ending like this cracks something deeper. It strips away certainty. It shakes your belief in how the world is supposed to work. And watching someone as grounded as Morgan Freeman visibly lose that belief was unsettling for everyone who saw it. The legal process will move forward in January. Dates will be set, arguments will be made, but in the court of public opinion, a line has already been drawn. Freeman's words didn't feel like commentary. They felt like a verdict delivered with painful clarity. Nick Reiner isn't being judged only for what he did. He's being judged for what he destroyed. A family, a lifetime of trust, the most basic bond that exists between parent and child. And now, because one of the most respected voices in the world spoke plainly, that story won't be softened or forgotten. This isn't about celebrity anymore. It's about boundaries ignored, warning signs dismissed, and love stretched past its breaking point. Freeman didn't speak to shock anyone. He spoke so the truth couldn't be reshaped later. And stories like this matter, not because they're dramatic, but because they force uncomfortable conversations that people usually avoid. That's why we'll keep breaking these moments down, piece by piece. If you want to stay updated on everything surrounding this case and other major celebrity stories, make sure you hit the like button. Share this video and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear how this story landed with you. And before you go, check out the next video on your screen right now. There's more unfolding, more details surfacing, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. I'll see you in the next one.